Hi.
I found the fake financial reports by accident and reported them anonymously, but there was something I couldn't have predicted. Hey Reddit, I'm not really sure where to start, but here's the story of how I, 23M, accidentally walked into a corporate minefield, and walked out with a completely different life. I'm a junior associate at a pretty big corporate firm. It's one of those places where you're either a cog in the machine or clawing your way to the top. My boss, Miss Vega, is one of those people, the type who thrives in chaos and demands perfection from everyone. She's brilliant but ruthless, and everyone, including me, walks on eggshells around her. Despite her reputation, I actually managed to keep up with her standards. We're not besties or anything, but she doesn't tear me apart like she does with others. She even gave me a grudging nod of respect once when I completed an impossible task on time. I figured if I could keep my head down and stay in her good books, I might actually survive this place. But then, a few weeks ago, I made a discovery that I wish I hadn't. It was late, I was organizing files for a quarterly report, and I stumbled across something off. A financial statement didn't just look wrong, it screamed fraud. At first, I thought it was a typo or some oversight. But the more I looked, the worse it got. Someone had gone out of their way to make these numbers look better than they were. I could feel my heart pounding as I sat there staring at the evidence. Was this just a mistake? Or was it something more sinister? I wrestled with myself for days. Should I speak up? What if I was wrong? What if speaking up meant risking my career? In the end, I couldn't let it go. I made an anonymous report to HR, thinking that would be the end of it. Boy, was I wrong. The next day, I got an email from Miss Vega, meet me in my office. Now. And that's when things got interesting. When I got the email from Miss Vega, my heart sank. Her office had a reputation. It wasn't just a place for meetings, it was where careers either advanced or ended. I braced myself as I stepped in, trying to steady my nerves. She barely looked up from her laptop, gesturing for me to sit. The air was heavy, and I couldn't read her expression. Without much preamble, she dove straight into the topic. Someone had reported financial discrepancies to HR, and since I was involved with the quarterly reports, she suspected I knew something. I froze. My anonymous report didn't seem so anonymous anymore. My mind raced as I considered my options. Deny everything, play dumb, but I couldn't see a way out where she didn't already know. After a moment of silence, I admitted I'd noticed the issues and had felt obligated to act. It wasn't easy finding the words, especially with her piercing gaze practically dissecting me. Her reaction wasn't what I expected. Instead of an explosion of anger, she studied me like I was some sort of specimen under a microscope. She asked if I had any idea what I'd stirred up and hinted that there was more to the situation than I could understand. Her tone shifted, becoming less accusatory and more calculating. It was as if she wasn't just questioning my actions but trying to decide if I could be trusted. She explained that what I found was only a small piece of a larger puzzle she had been working on for months. I sat there, reeling. She had known about the fraud all along. Finally, she laid out my options. I could pretend none of this ever happened and go back to my usual work, or I could help her see it through to the end. But she made it clear, choosing the latter wasn't without risks. It felt like a test, and I wasn't about to fail. Without much hesitation, I told her I was in. For a split second, I thought I saw approval in her expression. Then we're on the same side, she said. And just like that, my world turned upside down. After my meeting with Miss Vega, I couldn't stop thinking about her words. She'd known about the fraud all along, and yet she hadn't blown the whistle. Why? What was this larger puzzle she was piecing together? I didn't dare ask at the time, but I had a feeling I was about to find out. The next day, she called me into her office again, this time handing me a stack of files. They weren't just quarterly reports, they were a mix of emails, transaction records, and memos. As I flipped through them, the scale of the problem became clear. This wasn't just some minor accounting error, this was a full-blown scandal. Several senior executives were involved in what looked like an intricate web of fraudulent deals, kickbacks, and falsified statements. Miss Vega explained that she had been quietly gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment to expose them. What I had found was one thread in a much larger tapestry of corruption. I asked her why she hadn't gone to HR or legal already. Her answer was blunt. These aren't the kind of people who go down without a fight. If we act too soon, they'll cover their tracks and pin the blame on someone else, likely us. Timing is everything. The more she spoke, the more I understood the stakes. This wasn't just about money or reputation, it was about power. If these executives were exposed, it could shake the entire firm to its core. But if they weren't, it could mean more innocent people getting caught in the fallout, including me. Miss Vega laid out my role in her plan. I'd be helping her comb through the evidence, organizing it into a clear case that would be impossible to refute. She made it clear that discretion was key. if word got out that we were digging, the whole operation could implode. At first, I wasn't sure I could handle the pressure. I was just a junior associate, barely 2 years into my career. But as I worked alongside her, I started to see a different side of Miss Vega. She was still ruthless, but there was a sense of purpose behind it, a determination to set things right, no matter the cost. The work was grueling, and there were nights I barely slept. Every file we uncovered painted a clearer picture of the corruption, but it also raised more questions. How high did this go? How many people were complicit? And could we really take them all down? One night, as I stared at yet another damning email chain, I realized just how much my life had changed in the span of a week. I wasn't just a cog in the machine anymore, I was part of something much bigger. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if that was a good thing. A week into my assignment with Miss Vega, the tension in the office became impossible to ignore. It started with an HR email announcing a routine audit of the financial department. Miss Vega glanced at it, smirked, and muttered, "They're getting nervous." The timing was too convenient, it was clear someone had tipped off the higher-ups. The next day, Mr. Hayes, one of the implicated senior executives, called an all-hands meeting. He smiled too much, insisting the audit was just about transparency and standards. His words were polished, but his nervous glances told another story. "Classic move," Miss Vega said later. "They'll spin this as minor and throw someone under the bus." That thought stuck with me. If they needed a scapegoat, it could easily be someone low on the totem pole, someone like me. The office atmosphere was tense. Finance managers whispered in corners, locked cabinets mysteriously appeared, and old reports were suddenly reviewed. One afternoon, I overheard a hushed conversation about keeping things off the books. It felt like we were all bracing for an explosion. Miss Vega, however, was unfazed. She handed me a flash drive and said, "This is the backup. If anything happens to the originals, we'll still have this." Her tone was steady, but the implication rattled me. Later that night, while going through more files, I found emails showing a pattern of silencing anyone who raised questions. One employee had vanished from the industry entirely after leaving the firm. When I told Miss Vega, she paused, uncharacteristically uneasy. "It's worse than I thought," she admitted. "They don't just protect themselves, they destroy threats." Suddenly, the stakes felt higher than I had ever imagined. This wasn't just about exposing fraud, it was about survival. And for the first time, I wasn't sure I could trust anyone, not even her. A week after the audit announcement, things at the office went from tense to outright chaotic. HR started holding random interviews with employees, but it was clear who their focus was, anyone connected to the financial reports. My name hadn't come up yet, but I knew it was only a matter of time. Meanwhile, the senior executives doubled down on their efforts to control the narrative. Hayes and his cronies began issuing memos about streamlining operations and enhancing compliance. It was all corporate theater, but it was working. Most employees seemed to buy into the idea that this was just another audit. Miss Vega, however, wasn't fooled. If anything, the escalation only made her push harder. Late one evening, she called me into her office with a look I hadn't seen before, genuine concern. She'd intercepted an internal memo implicating a junior employee in procedural irregularities. The description was vague, but it was clear they were setting someone up to take the fall. "Stay sharp," she said. "They'll come for the weakest link. Don't let it be you." Her warning haunted me. The more evidence we gathered, the more dangerous the game became. We uncovered proof of offshore accounts and falsified expense reports, but with every discovery, the web of corruption seemed to grow. Then, one afternoon, the first domino fell. A mid-level manager in finance was abruptly let go for what the company called a breach of trust. Word spread like wildfire, and it didn't take long to realize he was the sacrificial lamb. The message was clear, no one was safe. I confronted Miss Vega about it, asking if we were too late to stop this. She didn't sugarcoat her answer. "This is their first move," she said. "But we're not finished yet." Despite her confidence, I felt the walls closing in. Every day, I wondered if I'd be next, if I'd walk into work and find security waiting to escort me out. The pressure was unbearable, but there was no turning back. The fallout from the finance manager's firing sent shockwaves through the office. People were spooked, second-guessing their every move. Whispers floated through the halls, no one knew who to trust, and paranoia was spreading fast. For me, the pressure was suffocating. I worked late every night, helping Miss Vega organize the mountain of evidence we compiled. Each new discovery deepened the scandal, but it also raised the stakes. Offshore accounts, shell companies, insider deals, every piece fit into a horrifying puzzle. The fraud wasn't just about inflating numbers, it was a deliberate, orchestrated siphoning of millions. Despite the mounting tension, Miss Vega was relentless. Her laser focus was almost intimidating, but it also kept me grounded. She had a knack for compartmentalizing, treating the chaos like a game of chess where every move mattered. One evening, as we were reviewing some particularly damning emails, I asked her why she was so invested in this. For a moment, she hesitated, a rare crack in her otherwise steely demeanor. "I've seen people like this destroy lives," she said finally. "If we don't stop them, they'll keep getting away with it." Her words stuck with me. This wasn't just about exposing corruption, it was personal for her. The next day, things took a dangerous turn. An IT tech approached me in the break room, acting unusually friendly. He mentioned some flagged network activity tied to my account, casually asking if I'd been accessing anything unusual. My blood ran cold. I played it off, saying I'd been doing normal work tasks, but the encounter left me rattled. I told Miss Vega immediately, and she wasn't surprised. "They're phishing," she said. "They know we're close to something big." Her calm demeanor reassured me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking a tightrope. One wrong move, and I'd fall, taking everything we'd worked for with me. By the end of the week, the office atmosphere was suffocating. The audit had become an excuse for executives to tighten their grip, and rumors of more firings swirled. I knew we were running out of time, but Miss Vega had a plan. "This isn't about surviving," she told me one night. "It's about making sure the right people go down." I didn't know if we'd succeed, but one thing was clear, the stakes were higher than ever, and failure wasn't an option. The next week felt like an all-out war. HR's interviews became more targeted, and the IT team started conducting random security checks on employee devices. It was clear they were trying to corner someone. My nerves were shot, but Miss Vega remained unshaken. We had enough evidence to blow the lid off the entire scheme, but Miss Vega wasn't ready to make a move. "Timing was everything," she said, "and the closer we got to the truth, the more dangerous it became." One afternoon, I was called into a meeting with Mr. Hayes. My heart raced as I walked into his office. He greeted me with an exaggerated smile, offering me a seat like we were old friends. The conversation started innocently enough, questions about my workload, my thoughts on the audit, but then he shifted gears. He casually brought up some irregularities in my department's work. The implication was clear: if anything suspicious was uncovered, I might be the one held accountable. I kept my responses measured, but inside, I was panicking. When the meeting ended, I went straight to Miss Vega. "They're on to us," I said. "They're desperate," she replied. "That's good. Desperate people make mistakes." Sure enough, a mistake came 2 days later. An internal memo circulated, announcing another termination, this time, a mid-level employee from HR. Word spread quickly that she'd been caught leaking confidential information. But what stood out was the timing. She'd been handling our anonymous complaint. Miss Vega wasn't fazed. "They're cleaning house," she said. "But they're also tipping their hand. Now we know how far they'll go to protect themselves." Despite her confidence, the pressure was getting to me. Every interaction felt like a potential threat, every glance from a coworker like an accusation. I began second-guessing everything, even Miss Vega. Late one night, while reviewing files at home, I stumbled upon a new email chain that sent chills down my spine. It detailed a containment strategy for whistleblowers, legal threats, reputation smearing, even surveillance. When I showed it to Miss Vega, her expression darkened. "This is the proof we needed," she said. "But it also means we need to move fast. They won't hesitate to use these tactics if they think we're close." Her words were a grim reminder of what we were up against. The walls were closing in, and it felt like only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. The pressure reached a boiling point when Miss Vega decided it was time to act. We had collected mountains of evidence, fraudulent accounts, kickbacks, offshore transactions, enough to bring down the entire network of corruption. Now, the challenge was delivering it without getting buried in the fallout. Miss Vega had been planning this moment for weeks. She explained her strategy: bypass the internal channels and go directly to an external investigator she trusted, a former colleague turned corporate watchdog. The risk was immense. If word leaked before the evidence was secured, the higher-ups could retaliate, and we'd lose everything. The plan was set in motion late on a Friday evening when the office was mostly empty. Miss Vega handed me a sealed envelope and a USB drive, her expression unusually solemn. "You'll deliver this to the investigator," she said. "Don't leave anything to chance. If anyone asks, you're working late." My pulse raced as I made my way out of the building, clutching the envelope like it was a live grenade. Every step felt like someone was watching, every shadow like it was hiding a threat. I managed to leave without incident, delivering the materials as instructed. That weekend was agonizing. I couldn't sleep, eat, or think straight. My phone stayed glued to my hand, waiting for a call from Miss Vega. When it finally came on Sunday evening, her voice was calm but urgent. "The investigator has everything. Now, we wait." Monday morning, the storm hit. A major news outlet broke the story, a massive fraud scandal involving senior executives at our firm. The report was scathing, detailing years of corruption and implicating some of the company's most powerful figures. The fallout was immediate. Hayes and 2 other executives were placed on indefinite leave pending a formal investigation. The board announced an emergency meeting, and the company's stock price nosedived. In the chaos, no one seemed to notice me. I kept my head down, pretending to be just another stunned employee. Meanwhile, Miss Vega moved like a general on the battlefield, maintaining her composure as if she hadn't orchestrated the entire thing. That evening, she called me into her office. For the first time, there was a hint of warmth in her expression. "You did well," she said simply. It wasn't exactly a heartfelt thank you, but coming from Miss Vega, it felt like the highest praise. The story wasn't over yet, there would be investigations, legal battles, and months of fallout. But for now, we'd struck the first blow. The corrupt executives had been exposed, and the firm would never be the same. The days following the exposé felt like walking through a battlefield after the dust had settled. The firm was in damage control mode, issuing public statements about cooperation with authorities and renewing its commitment to integrity. Internally, it was chaos. People whispered in hallways, speculating about who had known what and when. As for me, I managed to fly under the radar, for the most part. My role in uncovering the scandal wasn't public knowledge, and I was more than happy to keep it that way. But there were moments when I caught sidelong glances from co-workers, as if they suspected I knew more than I let on. Miss Vega, on the other hand, was untouchable. She maintained her usual cold, commanding presence, but there was a subtle shift in how people treated her. Executives who once spoke to her with arrogance now addressed her with a careful deference. She'd become a force to be reckoned with, and everyone knew it. The fallout was swift and brutal. Hayes and his associates were fired within a week, and their names were splashed across every business headline. Investigations revealed that their fraud had siphoned millions over the years, and lawsuits began piling up. Amid the chaos, I wondered what would happen to us, those who had dared to dig into the mess. Would we be hailed as heroes or quietly pushed out once the firm stabilized? I didn't have to wait long for an answer. One morning, Miss Vega called me into her office. The tension in the room was palpable as she closed the door behind me. "Carter," she began, her voice measured. "You've proven yourself in ways I didn't expect." I braced myself, unsure where this was going. "I'm promoting you," she said, sliding a document across the desk. "You'll be working directly under me as my new operations analyst. Consider this a vote of confidence, and a warning. You've stepped into a world where loyalty and discretion are everything. Don't make me regret it." I was stunned. The promotion was a significant step up, a direct acknowledgement of everything I'd done. But her words carried weight. This wasn't just a job anymore, it was a position of trust, one that came with both opportunity and risk. As I left her office, I felt a mix of pride and trepidation. The scandal had reshaped the company and my career in ways I couldn't have imagined. But it also left me questioning what kind of person I was becoming. Was I ready to navigate a world where every move was a calculated risk? One thing was certain, nothing at the firm, or in my life, would ever be the same again. Weeks after the scandal broke, the firm was still reeling. Investigators moved in and out of the building daily, combing through records and questioning staff. New policies were rolled out at breakneck speed, mandatory ethics training, stricter oversight, and revised protocols for handling finances. It was a desperate bid to salvage the firm's reputation. For me, life had changed in ways I hadn't fully processed. My new position as Miss Vega's operations analyst came with more responsibility, a bigger paycheck, and a seat at the table I never thought I'd reach so soon. But it also came with new pressures. I was no longer just a junior associate, I was now one of her trusted few, expected to keep pace with her relentless drive. Miss Vega, for her part, was busier than ever. She'd emerged from the scandal not just unscathed but stronger. The board relied on her to stabilize the company, and she navigated the chaos with the precision of a seasoned strategist. Despite her intimidating nature, I couldn't help but respect her even more. One afternoon, she called me into her office. This time, her tone was different, less businesslike, almost reflective. "You've done well," she said, leaning back in her chair. "But don't get comfortable. This world doesn't reward complacency." I nodded, sensing there was more she wasn't saying. "I chose you for a reason," she continued. "You saw something wrong and acted on it, even when it could have cost you everything. That's rare. But remember, loyalty and principles will be tested again. They always are." Her words lingered with me long after I left her office. She was right, this wasn't the end of the story, just the beginning of a new chapter. As the weeks turned into months, the firm began to rebuild. New leadership emerged, and the culture shifted, slowly, but noticeably. Employees were more cautious, more vigilant. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. As for me, I started to find my footing in my new role. The work was demanding, and Miss Vega's expectations hadn't softened, but I felt like I was finally in a position to make a real difference. I wasn't just a cog in the machine anymore, I was part of something bigger. Looking back, I realized how much I'd changed. I'd started this journey as a junior associate, content to keep my head down and do my job. Now, I understood the power of standing up for what's right, even when it's terrifying. It wasn't an easy road, and I knew there would be more challenges ahead. But for the first time, I felt ready to face them.
See you later.